Flipping is the worst job in real estate. There's a lot of ways to make money in real estate. I've done a lot of them. I've been in the turnkey space. I've flipped houses. I have privately loaned money. I have borrowed private money. I've been in every asset class from multifamily to office to retail to self-storage and warehouse to new development, new construction. I've done it all. I've done it all. And I can definitively say that flipping houses is the worst of all of those different activities and ways to make money in real estate. So I was sitting on a discussion panel and being asked about social media and marketing, and so I just brought it up. The worst job in real estate is renovating houses. It is the worst. I did it for a long time, and it's the worst thing you could possibly do in real estate. When I see somebody flipping a house, I just feel so bad for them. The idea wasn't to shit on flipping houses. It was really that there's a lot of things that people think are cool that really aren't that cool, and they make TV shows about it, and because other people who aren't in the industry think that's fascinating, right? And I was just talking about the flipping TV shows. And listen, I have a bunch of very good friends who have the TV shows on the different HGTVs and A&Es and the different networks and stuff, and they're phenomenal and fantastic humans. And guess what? They don't make their money from flipping houses. They make their money from, the only reason they do that is because of the influence that they get from being on a TV show and all the other ways that they make money. You can make money from flipping houses. You can make a lot of money from flipping houses. But it's not the best way to make money in real estate is my contention. I think a big one for me is I have this sense of like efficiency, and I have this sense of I hate waste, right? And in apartments, I can buy this paint, this flooring, this fixture, and I can use it on 100 different apartments. And as soon as I finish that apartment, I have extra paint, I take it to the second apartment or the third apartment and all those things. And so it's very easy. You can develop a lot of skills in flipping real estate, in flipping houses. You can go out and learn how to find good deals, how to negotiate with sellers, how to deal with contractors. But there's a lot of things that create constraints on you in that every house is different. So every design has to be customized. Every kitchen floor plan is different. And just it's hard to systematize the flipping of houses, right? Different neighborhoods, different price points, different finishes. It's ever changing on what backsplash you use and the color of the fixtures and a lot of that stuff. I'm not saying you can't make money. There's a lot of people who make a lot of money doing it and who are really, really good at doing it. It's hard to scale. And there's zero enterprise value. You can't sell a flipping business, right? Like it provides a good income, but every time you sell a house, you have to go and do it again in order to get paid again. And that's usually why people get out of their job and into real estate, is to get out of the rat race. And then it's like hopping out of the pan and into the fire. It's the exact same position that they're in. Maybe the check size is a little bit bigger. But if you don't have some way to build long-term enterprise value, it's just you're on the same hamster wheel that you've always been on. And I realize, listen, every single one of the, well, what if you did this? What if you did that? Yeah, I'm conceptually though, you're going through the whole process. There's a lot of work. You list it with a realtor. You go and sell it on the open market. And you have a buyer who, based on their tastes and preferences, comes in and either likes it or doesn't like it, moves quickly, moves really slowly. It's not generating any cash flow, so there's all these holding costs, a lot of carrying costs. There's a lot of stuff that you got to go through if you're flipping a house. Versus what if, let me just challenge you, what if you went and you bought a multifamily property? Or what if you bought a warehouse? Or what if you bought an office building or a retail strip? Or something that was a cash flowing asset? Hear me out. You go through the same amount of work to source the deal, the same amount of negotiating with a singular seller, but there's multiple units, the same amount of talking to your lender, just like there's hard money lenders in flipping houses, there's hard money lenders in the commercial world that'll just write a check and give you all the money if there's enough upside and you're buying it at a discount and all that kind of stuff. It's just valued a little bit differently. It's not valued based on the comp down the street that's sold with the same number of bedrooms and bathrooms and square footage. It's valued based on the income that the property can produce once it's stabilized, once it's all leased up and everybody's at market rate rents. So it's just little nuances that you can absolutely learn. My point here is you're doing the work already. Why not add a zero and reduce the risk by doing it for a cash flowing asset that's a little bit bigger, right? That can be rented out, and maybe reduce the ongoing carrying costs because you've got 10 units in a building, whether that's a retail building, an office building, a multifamily building. You got 10 units and 5 of them are rented, at least covering your carrying costs and your operating expenses. And so you're able to renovate the other 5 units, get those leased out, go back to the original 5 tenants and either sign new leases and keep them as is, or increase the rents a little bit, maybe move them into one of the newer units, one of the nicer units, sign a longer term lease without making any improvements. Like, there's a lot of different angles that you can take on it without having the ongoing carrying costs, without having the liability of something sitting, having a predictable buyer at the end because, hey, I know that this investment fund or this long-term hold investor will come in and buy this thing at a 7% cap rate. And so if you can be into it for a 10% cap rate at your cost basis, you're into it for $1 million and it produces $100,000 a year of net operating income, and somebody else is willing to buy it at a 7% cap rate, that essentially means you can make about $300,000 to $400,000 on this property in the same amount of effort, the same amount of time usually, a lot lower risk because it's cash flowing, and it's typically a bigger check size for doing the exact same amount of work. So I'm not shitting on flipping houses, I'm shitting on the person who is so close-minded to looking at other ways of making money and other ways to scale their business that they're just doing the same thing. If you got the same problem 5 years into business or 10 years, I've seen people 20, 30 years into business that's like, they've been talking about this problem for the past 20 years. How do you still have the same problem? How are you still doing the exact same thing without progressing? If you can flip an apartment complex or you can flip a retail strip inside, outside of 12 months in a day, all of a sudden it turns into long-term capital gains. The other thing is because it's rental property, you can do a 1031 exchange. That's tax advantaged. You can't do that on something that's not a rental property. At least it's frowned upon in the eyes of the IRS. Or you say, hey, I'm not going to friggin' sell this thing. And instead of selling it and making your $300,000-$400,000 pop, maybe you just go and get a new loan and you take all your chips off the table and they appraise it for 1.3, 1.4 million bucks, and they give you a 75, 80% loan on it. You get your $1 million back off the table, pay your lender back, and now it's house money in play. But you have an actual asset with $300,000 of equity in it that's built your balance sheet and increased your net worth. That makes you more bankable. And every single month that those tenants are paying rent, it pays down the principal balance on your loan. And every single year, as those rents bump up in rental rate, it increases the value of the building. And all of a sudden, you pick your head up in 10 years from now, and there's this spread of paying down principal, rent growth, and you're like, hey, this thing is now worth $1.6 million. And you've created this forced savings almost, right, of equity growth and true enterprise value while you take your $1 million and go and do it again and again and again. Well, Tim, I need that $300,000 to live off of, no problem. Maybe you take a 5% or a 10% acquisition fee, meaning instead of being into it for $1 million, now you're into it for $1.1 million. You take $100,000, you put it in your pocket, and you take this acquisition fee. And now, all I'm doing is borrowing for my own deal. Yeah, but it's not you or your investors paying that money. It's your tenants paying rent every single month that's paying you to have that money in your pocket to go out and live off. So that's the beauty of it. Not only are you still making money up front, but you actually are building enterprise value with tax advantages, long-term equity growth, and still having that midterm money that, guess what, you control. I'm not worried about a buyer coming in and buying. It's one less thing I got to deal with. Now, you do have to deal with asset management or property management. If you have enough property, you can build that out in-house. You can find a decent property manager to then manage property, or maybe you have retail tenants and office tenants, business tenants that are on triple net leases that you don't really have to babysit. They're responsible for taxes and insurance and maintenance and the upkeep and the utilities and all the other things in that unit. And I got a buddy who owns $100 million plus of office and retail tenants, and he has one employee. That's it. An admin to just make sure that's all taken care of, sends it over to the bookkeeper, third-party bookkeeper, and they just make sure he's got a profit and loss statement every single month, and everything's clean and easy to manage because he just goes business to business as opposed to having a bunch of tenants. Me personally, I've built out an in-house management company, so we don't mind having the tenants, and there's a lot more that goes into that, a lot more moving parts and in and out. But for me, as soon as I realized that this was feasible, I got the hell out of flipping houses. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. As soon as I understood that I can take all those skill sets and move into buying and holding commercial assets, it was game over. My net worth went from $1 million to multiple 8 figures within a span of a couple of years, just because I focused on long-term enterprise growth, right? And enterprise value and building it that way. So I'm not here to rattle your cage. Well, I guess I kind of am. But I'm not here to offend you. I don't want you to be offended. And if you get a little bit upset, it's probably because you needed to hear this. Usually you don't like the news that you hear in the moment that you hear it. And then once it resonates, once it sits with you, you're like, hate to admit it, but he had a point. I want you to sit with this. I want you to understand that there's something better out there. There's better ways to make money. And if you have interest in learning a little bit more about this stuff, hit me up. I'll point you in the right direction. I'll give you some insights. But if you're always doing what you always did, and you're not trying to move the needle and not trying to grow and not trying to get outside of your comfort zone, you're doing the wrong things. There's a rule of life that you're either growing or you're dying. You're either ripening or you're rotting. And so if you're not growing, then you're probably dying. You're just staying stagnant, and that will eat you up over time. So take a look at some of these other things. I'm not saying to get fully out of that. If you got a great business, if it's automated, that's flipping houses, that's a good active income that you can create while you're building up this portfolio. But everybody I know who's gone from single family into commercial, I've never seen go back to single family. Make sure you're following us. I'd love to hear your takeaways. I'd love to hear some of your insights. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story as you're going along. And if I can be a resource, don't hesitate to reach out. So appreciate you being here. Until next time, be your best.